So welcome to this event hosted by the Media and Culture Concentration of the Graduate Program in International Affairs here at the New School. My name is Sean Jacobs. I am an assistant professor in GPIA, which is short for Graduate Program in International Affairs, and I'm chair of the Media and Culture Concentration. So tonight's event is entitled Community Media and Civil Society, Then and Now. And my job is very simple. It's only to introduce the panelists, and Christine Newkirk, who's a community media worker herself, as well as a graduate student here at GPIA, will do the moderating. So I'm just going to introduce these. She knows more about the subject, so what I will do is I will go sit down and I will listen, because I think I should also learn something. So without further delay, let me introduce our panelists and our moderators. So first up, we have, I'm going to start with the panelists first. We have Lova Rakoto Malala. I said it the right way? Perfect. That was good. Is the editor of the Francophone region for Globalvoices, an international community of bloggers who report on blogs and citizen media from around the world. You must have seen Globalvoices by now if you go online a lot. He's also the co-founder of FOCO, an NGO driven to promote the online exposure of social grassroots projects based on the island nation of Madagascar, that's my editing, in the Indian Ocean off the east coast of Africa. I did that part. Lova was born and raised in Madagascar and moved to Indiana to do a PhD in biomedical sciences at Purdue University. I thought that was an odd transition from biomedical sciences into blogging, but anyway, after 2 years as a mobile health researcher in Durban, South Africa, and in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, he came back to the US to do a mid-career master's program in public policy at the Woodrow Wilson Institute of International Affairs at Princeton University. Lova was involved in the citizen reporting of the political crisis in Madagascar in 2009 that resulted in a coup and the dismissal of Madagascar from the UN General Assembly for 2 years in a row. Citizen reporting became important because of censorship of mainstream Madagascan media and were mentioned by the BBC, the Wall Street Journal, the BBC and the Wall Street Journal. Second, we have James Tamba Levy, who until recently was director of the teaching radio station of the University of Sierra Leone, which is called Radio Mount Oriol. Is that correct? Yeah. And he's the chief news editor of Cotton Tree News, a news and current affairs program run jointly by the Swiss-based NGO Fondation Hirondelle and the University of Sierra Leone. James has also worked extensively as a print journalist in Sierra Leone, starting as a reporter for the Sierra Leone Catholic magazine and culminating in a position as editor-in-chief at the University of Sierra Leone's teaching newspaper. He's a member of the editorial board of University Values, an online newsletter published by the academic rights group Scholars at Risk, which is headquartered at NYU, and he's currently on a Fulbright scholarship pursuing graduate studies in public communication in the Department of Communication and Media Studies at Fordham University's Graduate School of Arts and Sciences in New York. And then I have Priscilla Neri, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. She's a Brazilian journalist, activist, and documentary filmmaker who joined Witness, and I quote, an international human rights organization that provides training and support to local groups to use video in the human rights advocacy campaigns. She's been there, I think, since 2008 to help run the hub. I think she's going to say a little bit about that, and support Witnesses campaigns online. She's currently working on Witnesses campaigns on gender-based violence and development-induced displacement. Prior to Witness, Priscilla ran the New York office of CDI, a network of technology and civic engagement schools in Latin America. Priscilla also previously worked as a reporter for the Brazilian newspaper O Estado de São Paulo, and a freelance journalist for media outlets including Reuters and Carta Capital. In 2005, Priscilla traveled to the, and I'm going to totally mangle this name, Sertão Nordestino, the poorest region in Brazil, to collaborate with local NGOs and shoot a documentary about 7 women, which is, the documentary is now in post-production. And finally, she's an MFA candidate in the Integrated Media Arts program at Hunter College in New York. And then our final panelist is Liz Hodes. Liz is one of the founding members of Digital Democracy, an organization, and again I quote because I don't want to misrepresent people, that works with local partners to put information into the hands of people who need it most, those neglected, disenfranchised, or abused by their rulers, unquote. And this organization was founded in 2008. I think it's part of another organization. Since 2007, Liz has been the programs manager at Digital Democracy and has worked in various capacities there, including producing Digital Democracy's online TV series, DDTV. In addition, she's the production coordinator for the New York-based television production company Left Right, for which she has worked on over 20 documentary and reality television series, and she previously worked at Keeler Films and Warner Brothers. And then finally, our moderator, Christine Newkirk, is the managing editor of Youth Media Reporter and a senior program associate for the Center for Youth Development and Engagement at the Academy of Educational Development, or AED, here in New York City. She's the youth media practitioner. She's a youth media practitioner focused on community-based work in Brazil and New York City. Christine also has an extensive social research background, previously supporting the efforts of CBOs in the United States and parts of Latin America. She'll receive her MA. She's also a student here, as I mentioned earlier. She'll get her MA in International Affairs at the New School in the fall of 2010. So after that very long praise, I was like a praise singer for our panel. I'm going to hand over to Christine and sit down. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for coming today. I feel like I also don't really need this. So it's my pleasure to host Liz, Lova, James, and Priscilla here at the New School. I feel their work represents the spirit of the media and culture concentration in the GPIA program, and also the spirit of the New School in general. And so we're honored to have them here today. And just before I let them get started, I wanted to briefly set a context for the panel. It's called Community Media and Civil Society Then and Now. So just the historical context. You know, historical models of community media included public access stations, alternative media organizations, and guerrilla media outlets. And before about 1995, community and alternative media technology included film cameras, radio broadcast, and print. And the media produced included long-form documentary films, radio programming, newspapers, and zines. And what this meant was that community or alternative media very often had a very local focus. It was produced in the interest of informing disenfranchised populations or representing populations whose perspectives and interests were not reflected in the mainstream media. But it used technology that allowed for communication just from the few to the many. Technology that was not inherently interactive, and technology that was not always necessarily adaptive to unique circumstances or very convergent, meaning you would use multiple media platforms to communicate a message or reach different audiences. So what we're looking at now, in 2010, is a very different media landscape that provides an opportunity for community, alternative media, and new media organizations to do really innovative things that target specific audiences and that work as part of larger strategies to accomplish specific goals, and to do a lot in terms of advocacy, social justice work, as well as communication of information. So I invited these 4 leaders in the field of citizen and alternative media and human rights media so that we can learn from their successes, their best practices, and their challenges. And these speakers represent the vanguard of their field. They really do. And so I invite all of you to be thinking about the kind of work that you want to be doing as you're listening to them, so that we have an opportunity to share experiences and bring some of their insights into the work that we do on a daily basis. So thank you, and please join me in welcoming our panelists. And I'm going to have Liz go first.
This is great. You guys have been looking at our mission for 10 minutes. I'm just going to put it to... Okay, so we are Digital Democracy, and to be a little bit more specific about what we do, we empower marginalized communities through new technologies. We work directly with, grassroots organizations and technology groups to help communities use these tools as a means of empowerment. This sort of encompasses the idea that people are not voiceless. They just sometimes need the training and the tools and the forums to amplify their own voices. So we have a lot of programming, and the way that we incorporate media is we have a lot of programming with digital photography and also online and open video. The digital photography is work we do around the world, and the online video is through our television series DDTV. Something we emphasize in our media is community storytelling. We want these tools and trainings that we do to inspire people to talk about and show their communities. We want to hear their voices. And we want them to highlight the issues that are affecting them, especially in post-conflict and crisis locations, and of course in among marginalized communities who we work with. Project Einstein is our photography training, digital photography project, and it began in Bangladesh with Rohingya, who are a Muslim ethnic group from Burma. They are not recognized as being Burmese, and so they live now in refugee camps in southern Bangladesh. We went there and with the idea to give these kids that we were working with just the basic skills in digital photography and have them do what they wanted under the umbrella of what's life like when you're living in a refugee camp. So they chose their own topics, and they took photos having to do with happy, sad, peace, and the disabled. And then we also did audio interviews with them and asked them what they dream about and like that. And then we compiled those into audio slideshows so that we could hear from them and what they wanted to say. So we've replicated this model, this Project Einstein, and done photography trainings in South Africa, in Thailand, in Haiti, and in Kenya. We've also added a digital pen pal element, connecting youth in different countries through online and offline curriculum around photography. So this fall, we're connecting Burmese youth who are living in a refugee camp in Thailand with resettled Burmese youth living in Indianapolis, which has one of the largest populations of resettled Burmese in the U.S. And it's connecting them and also the American peers in the classroom. And it's, photographs have no language barrier, and it's a way for them to communicate about their lives and talk about where they intersect, such as what they do for fun and what they eat and how they celebrate. And this is actually, as you can see, a celebration in Indianapolis. So the other thing that we do is we've expanded this through to Haiti, and there's also empowerment through photography. In Haiti, there are high rates of gender-based violence. This rose exponentially after the earthquake, after people were displaced into camps, and there's little security and lights and like that. And we wanted to give women the ability to show their communities and how they fit within these communities and the roles that they play. And back in April, we did photography trainings with heads of grassroots women's organizations. And our goal with these is, and it was the same basic structure, they had themes and they were taking pictures of themselves and also their communities. And our goal was to give them the courage to speak out about the violence that's going on there. And these trainings are a first step in our programming as we incorporate cell phones and map-based programs like Frontline SMS, Ushahidi, to enable women to report the violence and have the location of these reports visible on a map for people to respond to it. And actually, currently, right now, we have a team in Haiti who are training these same activists how to report on the elections, which are coming up at the end of November, via cell phone and cameras and other tools. We brought cameras with us and we left them down there with organizations so that the women could continue to take photos while they were there. So jumping over to our television series, DDTV was created as a way to give people increased access to our organization, to increase transparency. Where we go, what we do, who we meet with, and our co-directors who are pictured here, Emily up here and Mark down here, they're the ones who are filming. They travel around the world with our programming, and they use cheap tools like mobile phones and flip cameras to film this series. It's relatively low production value, which we do on purpose because we want them to use the tools that we train people in around the world. So they upload footage to the web, we download it here in New York, and we start editing immediately, and that's sort of our structure, and it works great for us. And in these actually are two stills from an episode we did on medical tourism, as Mark decided to get inoculated in Thailand when he was there, and we filmed the whole thing. So that was just a way, it was a funny episode, and actually one of our most watched episodes. It incorporated some issues that are going on right now, and also was very personal to them. We also show the launch of our programmings. Emily's doing a photo training here in Haiti, and down below, Mark is training in Thailand, which was during the launch of our program, Handheld Human Rights, which is a mobile-based program for community-based organizations to report human rights abuses occurring inside Burma. And I'll take a second to note, in the challenges category of doing media and filming as we do this is security. And, because we're doing programming and also filming, we have to take extra special care to let the people that we're filming with understand that they don't have to be on camera, they don't have to be viewed, and actually we don't put people on who don't want to be, of course, that they trust us, and that, we're trying to do our programming in these communities, so security is a big issue. We also interview inspiring people. This is Uaga, who was the leader of the Saffron Revolution in Burma. He's a monk, and he's now actually living in Brooklyn and helping to educate people around Burma. But we interviewed him about technologies, about the Saffron Revolution, and all of that, and he was really inspiring, and actually that was our first episode of the television series. We also do some live streaming, which allows people to ask questions in real time, often through Twitter. And this is actually a short clip from one of our episodes from Thailand showing the live stream, and this is a little test for PowerPoint to see if it works. Nope, it doesn't. So I'm gonna just, for a second, escape and get the video.
Filming live from Southeast Asia in Thailand.
Hello, everyone. We have a really stressful day. First day of training. We have here to share with us. How does the photo train today affect the school?
I think it went very well. Yeah, the school was definitely do you think that photography can be used for your community? Yeah, sure. Kita lakukan itu, kalau kita handle camera to represent dulu. Jadi lebih kalau kita baca ya sama kita the public. So no one can is
So we're still working out the quality of the live stream, but that was in a refugee camp in Thailand, and the fact that we were able to get that online was great. And so that was one experiment that we do with live video. We also did the same with a photo training we did in Haiti, actually, which happened about a day before the earthquake. We had a team down there during the earthquake, and this, when we do live stream online, there's a map automatically that places where the phones are. But this ended up being crucial because all of the equipment we used, all of the photos that were taken were destroyed because our equipment was destroyed during the earthquake. So we have this record of what we did for that training. So live video, as it develops, can be great, and also, it really shows, lets a community speak in real time and answer questions and all of that. And also, in terms of viral video, there's a huge benefit to having our series online. A year ago, we made an episode with a woman named Ju, who's an editor of an online news source in Thailand called Prasha Thai. She had been arrested because someone posted comments about the Thai king that were not very good on her site, and it was just a short time before they took them down, but it was because they didn't take them down immediately. And it wasn't removed fast enough. And this year, and she's wonderful and she's inspiring, and this year she was at a couple weeks ago actually, she was at an Internet Liberty conference in Budapest, and she came back to Thailand and was arrested immediately. And one of the things that really helped get the word out was this video we'd made a year ago about her. She was arrested for the same thing, and it created a campaign on Twitter, Free Jew, and let me just go back to the short clip from the episode.
Why are you still doing this work even though you were arrested?
The arrested is just one process, but we still need to stand
Sorry.
for the thing that we believe is right. Our belief since we start Prashadai. Our founder, he quite believe in the right to access information. I think if people have the right to access the kinds of adequate information, people can making decisions on their own, and the society provide the capability for the people to manage their life. It's the same as a democracy.
So what is the state of democracy in Thailand?
It's unstable. I still believe we have the potential to learn and to growing up, that democracy is not the final answer for everything, but there is like a pathway for the people to learn and evolve and growing up through that.
So that's just a part of the episode with her, and she's really incredible. And we were able to get the word out about her through that and fundraise for her bail to get her out of jail when she was arrested. So the other thing, and sort of the last note I have, is about open video, and that being that our video it's online, it's available to anyone to watch for free. We license all of our media, our photos, our video with Creative Commons, which makes it available for anyone to use and share as long as they attribute us and don't use it commercially and share under the same license. It's, open video, which is basically online video and that's free, is, it allows videos to go viral. It allows videos to be used for change in that way for people who can't afford to buy video and see it, and it can be anywhere. And that's really important. We're hosted on Blip, which is great, and we also have a Vimeo page and YouTube and on our website. And it allows everyone to watch stories like Ju's story. And so it's quite important to have all of those available. And it's great for us. We, in putting together our series, we use a lot of photographs, especially of the earthquake, and we had an episode that was interviewing a member of our team about the earthquake, and we were able to get a lot of photos to use from people had them on Creative Commons, which is great. You can really make a fuller story of what you're doing. So that's pretty much it. That's my email address, and my embarrassing Twitter handle is Red Banana. And you can also follow DigiDem, which is Digital Democracy, on Twitter.
Okay, so I'd like to bring up James next, and I didn't say this before, but each one of them is going to present, and then I'll ask a question or two, and then open it up to you, because I know you're here because you want to talk to them, not to us. So, thank you. Oh, did you need?
Yeah. Where is my?
There. Here,
There was this. Is it? There's the other one. Oh, there's another one.
Oh, is it this one?
No, no, no. Okay, let me just open another one again.
You just have to press harder. Press harder. It's an old.
Good evening. My name is James, and I'm from Sierra Leone. I'm here to talk about cutting tree news. Before giving you or presenting my organization, it's but fitting to give you a background of Sierra Leone and a brief historical background of the media landscape so that you can actually appreciate what Cutting Tree News has been doing and is continuing to do. Sierra Leone, the capital Freetown, started as a settlement for free slaves as far back as 1878. In 1808, it became a British Crown colony, and then in 1961, it gained independence from Britain. By the time Sierra Leone gained independence, in 1961, there was only one radio station and one TV station in the country. There were several newspapers, but only one government-controlled radio and television. And then we had the Civil War in 1991, when insurgents from neighboring Liberia invaded Sierra Leone, and then they fought for 11 years. So for 11 years, we had a civil war wherein information was going out pretty much from a government-controlled TV and government-controlled radio. The only alternative was the British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC, that gave alternative information, and most often than not, give the other side of the story, and that is what the insurgents were fighting for. Sierra Leoneans, by and large, were fed with what we call propaganda from government-controlled TV and radio. Up to the peace agreement signed in 2002, when the war ended, we actually had just one radio station and one TV station, but there were several newspapers, and there are reasons for that. According to United Nations Development Program Index, at the moment in 2010, Sierra Leone has a literacy population of 38%. So you can imagine around the 90s or the early 80s what the literacy rate was like. So Sierra Leone is pretty much a rural country with a high illiteracy population. So whilst government was very much opened to the proliferation of newspapers, because that can only serve the elite group, it was very, very much jittery about opening up the media space to accommodate radio and television. But in 2000, Parliament passed a law that established the Independent Media Commission, and that's the IMC, and it was charged with a mandate to register and monitor the press and the radio and television stations. And then between 2000 to 2007, we had a proliferation of radio stations. About 40 radio stations, mostly community radio stations, came into existence. However, the proliferation of channels or frequencies did not in any way ensure divergent opinions and views because of several reasons. So it was against that backdrop that an organization based in Switzerland called Fondation Hirondelle came to Freetown and decided to partner with the University of Sierra Leone, Furobe College, to establish what they call Cutting Tree News. Now, as you can see from the chart, Sierra Leone is pretty much a radio country. Because of the high illiteracy rate, the survey carried on by CTN revealed that radio is not only the most important channel of communication, it is also the most reliable. So we realized that the best way to capacitate people with information to make informed judgments, to scrutinize their political leaders, and to hold them accountable is to use the radio. And Cutting Tree News has been doing this in partnership with the University of Sierra Leone. Cutting Tree News is not a radio station. It's a news and program production outfit, but then its hub is at the University of Sierra Leone's teaching radio station. So it is using a facility, a separate studio within the university radio station, and then doing its own program and disseminating it to 14 partner radio stations. This is our website, as you can see. We have sorry, I'm not really comfortable with the Mac. I'm pretty much comfortable with the PC. Yeah. I'm trying to scroll. To go up.
Yeah.
Okay, this one. This is
Wait,
what I was
sorry.
looking for.
I'm going to try to make it smaller so that they can see
Okay,
the
I've
whole-
seen it. No, this is what I want.
I know.
Okay, sure. Now, the country is pretty much mountainous, and those who are familiar with radio will confirm that it's difficult to cover a country with radio that is mountainous, because FM signals do not penetrate through hills. The moment they reach hills, that's the end of it. So what we did was to identify initially 9 community radio stations around the country that are strategically positioned so that we can work in partnership with those community radio stations and also with the United Nations Radio in order to have a countrywide reach. So that was what we did. Eventually, we expanded it to 14 radio stations. So we are actually working from Freetown, and then we have 14 radio stations in all 12 districts of the country, picking our signals via satellites, and some through an ordinary FM tuner, and then simultaneously broadcasting our news and programs. So that's the kind of partnership we have. Now, why we decided to come on board was the fact that the community radio stations that have been in existence had several problems. It's a new phenomenon. The practice of running community radio stations is actually a new enterprise in Sierra Leone. So there is confusion as to what actually or how community media should be structured and how it should be run and how it should be operated. So some of the problems they face are funding and the political interference. As I said earlier, the government, successive governments have been very jittery to open the airwaves to people to register their radio stations. So even when the Independent Media Commission was established and licenses were given to radio stations to operate at the community level, the politicians were still interfering, and they are still interfering into the daily running of those community radio stations. There is a weak management structure. There is lack of accountability on the community, of the community radio stations to the very community in which they operate. There is this problem of technical capacity, and of course, poor infrastructure. The capital of Freetown enjoys an electricity rationing at best. So if the capital can't have 24-hour electricity, you can't talk about the provinces. So these are some of the problems. So what we did was to ask international NGOs and governments to come on board and fund our project, so that at the end of the day, the fact that we are not asking neither the community nor government for funding, that in some way can insulate the Cutting Tree News project from political interference. So that's how we came into existence. Now, how do we operate? It's interesting. CTN, as I said, is owned jointly by the University of Sierra Leone and Fondation Hirondelle. It's a Swiss-based NGO. It's hosted by Radio Mansourian, a teaching radio station. It is one of FH, Fondation Hirondelle's numerous projects in Africa. The Swiss-based NGO Fondation Hirondelle works in conflict and post-conflict societies. For example, we have projects in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, in Rwanda, in Burundi, in DRC, and then at the moment we are operating in Sudan. We are currently preparing for the referendum between the South and the North, eventually. We run a 6-minute news on the hour and a 2-minute news summary every half hour. Our main news bulletin is done in English, but it's also translated in the four major languages of Sierra Leone. That is according to, we chose those languages according to the statistics office, those that are leading the first four, among them the Creole. And then we have our flagship program, which comes 6 o'clock in the morning. We call it CTN at 6. It is done in English because it is a news and current affairs program. But besides that, all our programs are done in the local languages. Now, we have some audio programs. I'm not sure it will make some sense to you because they are all done in the local languages. But this is my favorite. It's a soap program. Now, the programs reflect the diversity of the society. We cater for women with a program called Woman Talk. In Creole, Woman Talk means what women want to say. So we give voices to women. The program Ask the Experts is pretty much catering for the elite society, the elite in the society. It's about looking at specific programs. And then our sources for this program are mainly university lecturers or professors. For example, we want to talk about microcredit, how to explain what microcredit means. We'll have to go to the university and then probably to the Department of Economics, get an economist and explain what microcredit is all about and how it is supposed to be administered. We have the program Artbeat. Artbeat is an environmental program. This is a science and environmental program. We talk about deforestation, we talk about pollution, and then related issues. We have Health Watch. Health is a very major problem in Africa, especially in that part of the world, Sierra Leone. We basically focus our attention on sanitation. What can make people not involve them in sickness so that they can, it's cost fortune to go to the hospital. So what we do is we concentrate on prevention rather than cure. So these are, well, I'm trying to get this program for you, Woman Talk, and I want you to get, even though you can't understand it, but I want you to get the feel of it. It's the program that makes politicians nervous in the capital. People don't want their names to be mentioned, or their government ministries or their departments. Okay, this is the program, Mami and Omo. It's done in Creole. Okay, basically this is a dialogue program. What it does is look at current issues affecting the society and then talk about it. For example, if the street is dirty, or if police are taking bribes from the drivers, if the drivers are reckless and indisciplined, if the youths are involved in some antisocial behavior, these are topics that are captured by these two people. It's in a form of gossip, and they discuss it just like we have this tradition in Africa where women go by the riverside and then in the process talking about what is happening in the village, about topical issues. So it's a form of storytelling. It's lighthearted, but it's very serious. And what we realize is that whenever we bring up issues into this program, the politicians and policymakers are always, they always act quickly. For instance, there have been instances where a whole street has been blocked by debris or refuse. And we've spoken about it on this program. The next day, what we realize, by the following week, it has been cleared. There have been instances where there have been corrupt practices at the quay, where people are supposed to import their stuff and collect it and pay the official money. And we realize that it is characterized by bribery. We talked about it. The president paid a visit to the office. There have been instances where teachers pay more attention to extra classes and not really teaching students in the school, taking money to conduct extra classes in their private homes and not doing anything in the school. We've talked about that. That has forced the Ministry of Education to actually pass policies prescribing the conduct of extra classes at the expense of normal schooling. So it's a very effective way of communicating. As I said, what we do in our news, we don't editorialize. In the 6-minute news, we give the straight news that comprises what you know as the five Ws and 1 H, the how, when, where, what, and what have you. And then what we do in the programs, we decided to get and capture the actual voices of the grassroots people. Now, before CTN came into being, communication was pretty much a top-bottom paradigm, a top-bottom approach. But when we came, we decided to function pretty much like an alternative media, giving voices to societies that have been otherwise marginalized by either commercial media or the government-controlled radio. So it's like it's really empowering the people with information to scrutinize their local leaders, scrutinize their politicians, and scrutinize policymakers, and above all, to hold them accountable, especially when they are in times of elections. So we are really, really constrained, as I can use this forum, to announce that our project will be running out by the end of 2011. What happens after that in terms of funding, I don't know. We actually don't task or ask the community to support the radio. Initially when we started, although now we've created a forum for that, but the project is pretty much capital intensive, and Sierra Leone as a poor country, it's not feasible to really ask the people. We don't see how the monies contributed by people can help to run a massive project like this. So what we do is to ask foreign governments. At the moment, our projects are supported by the government of Germany, and okay. CTN is a partnership NGO. It's funded by the European Union and the governments of Germany and Ireland. Those are our sources of funding, and the funding will run out by 2011. What happens after that, we really don't know. But this is a project that must survive, because at the moment, Sierra Leone has opted for public media. That was some 6 months ago. There is public media. But those who are familiar with public media, it's not pretty much far from mainstream corporate media. In other words, its contribution to democracy is minimal. Their interest is either protecting political power or protecting economic interest. So the only way we can continue to empower the people is to give them alternative voices. And that can only be done in countries like Sierra Leone through the radio. And that's how we are surviving. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And to follow that, I'd like to invite Lova to talk about Global Voices.
Oops, that's not mine. Sorry. Okay, I'm gonna need your help. I think. Oh. Oh. Here. Okay. All right. Yes. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for having me, and it's an honor to be with this panel. It's we have pretty much like-minded here, I think. And well, as Sean said, I'm from Madagascar. Anyone been to Madagascar here? Oh, lovely. As you probably know, we had a coup about a year ago. Oh, you were not there. Well, that's good. It's. But basically, the tension, what I would like to talk to you about today is that there's still a lot of people, a lot of conversation that says that there was not really a coup in Madagascar. And to be able to sort through this kind of thing, we need to get into the details of what people are saying in Madagascar. And that's basically what we try to illustrate with Global Voices. So what is Global Voices? Global Voices is basically a global community of volunteers who aggregates and contextualize the events that are happening in their corner of the world. We have close to 400 contributors right now, going from online reporters to translators to activists that have produced about 43,000 blog posts in 350 different categories. Most of our authors reside in the countries that they're talking about. So why was Global Voices created? Well, it really came about as the brainchild of Rebecca McKinnon and Ethan Zuckerman that you might be familiar with, who both realized that there were very important conversations that were happening online and that the mainstream media would totally ignore. So, for instance, if you remember the post-electoral violence in Kenya in 2007, it was well covered in the media. You could see the terrifying images of conflict and violence within tribes. But what was not talked about was, for example, that there was an important grassroots conversation that took place online on the platform called IHaveNoTribe.com, where all Kenyans were posting messages of peace, saying that they were not condoning the violence and that it was actually quite critical in some kind of return to normalcy afterwards. You could also have another example of that was, as I said, in Madagascar, where there was a coup. I will talk about Madagascar because I'm a little more familiar about that, where most of us know that there was a coup back in 2009. But I think if you were actually following what the bloggers were saying in Madagascar 3 months before that, you could see it coming. You could see that there was a lot of issues about land grabbing, about monopoly and rent seeking. That was a premise to what was going on. And even though the current government would try to tell you that it was really a popular uprising and there was no coup in Madagascar, the fact that you follow the news, what the bloggers are saying, will be able to tell you pretty clearly that the army was heavily involved. So what we do basically is that at Global Voices, what is ignored by the media? Why is it that it is ignored? And we talk often about power divide and about connectivity divide. You can see that there's not much bandwidth still going on in the southern hemisphere, for example. And even though there's a lot of the conversation, there's not much connection in the countries that are so-called in the dark. If you know where to look for it, there are some really important conversation. You just need a little bit of help. So a little bit of a background on citizen media. I'm pretty sure we would agree on most of the points I have up there. Why is citizen media important? There's a potential for real-time reporting. It can provide a bridge between different communities and a good conversation, and I will talk a little more about that, about discussions that are happening in communities within a country, but also in different countries. There's also the ability to circumvent censorship, and it also shows a strong sign of civic engagement. If you're willing to talk about the issues online, then shows that your civil society is probably engaged. Well, the negatives, I think it's all the same pretty much everywhere. A lot of the blogs are unverified. The quality of the content varies quite a bit. And there is a need for efficient aggregation and curation, I think. And most importantly, when there is an important conversation, that conversation is often ignored because it lacks exposure. So, given all that, so what we offer at Global Voices is basically that we will translate what those conversations are about. We will filter it, and we will give you a context, because most of the time we live in the places that we talk about. And we provide the exposure through technography, clearly. For example, most of our articles are then pulled out on Google News so that it's been known by, it can be easily searchable. So beside that that core mission of Global Voices, that is to promote unheard voices throughout the world, there's 3 specific projects that I would like to talk about. And basically, one is called the Lingua Global Voices Translation Project. And what is happening here is that the first mission is to bring non-English content online into English and at the forefront. But the really neat treat for us is when we see a conversation that happens between the Kenyan blogosphere and the Mongolian blogosphere, because we translated those and they both talk about subject like climate change or the food crisis. And that's when we know that we've done something that is quite important. Right now we have 17 different versions of Global Voices translated, and we are, I think, 5 more that are coming. The Swahili should be there. It's not there yet, but we have Swahili that's coming up soon. The other important thing is that in order to hear the voices, we have to be able to promote freedom of expression, to protect freedom of expression, and to monitor it. And this is called the Advocacy Project for Global Voices. The goal here is basically to build a community of anti-censorship bloggers that will protect the expression of free expression online. And also, through a new project that we call Threatened Voices, we have created a database of all the places in the world where bloggers have been threatened, either imprisoned or actually killed. There's a few stories that I'm sure you know of in Iran and in China right now. Finally, what is really important is that when we talk about blogging and citizen reporting, we have to acknowledge that it's still the access to blogs is still reserved to a certain portion of the population that is privileged. And we have to address the fact that maybe voices of more vulnerable people needs to be also put online. And that is what we're trying to do at Rising Voices. We are basically moving towards a disenfranchised population and teach them how to use mobile technology, a blogging platform, and videos. So we've gone into a little bit like what digital democracy is doing. We've gone into places in Medellin, in Nakuru, and in Tomasina in Madagascar with the kids right there, and we teach them how to blog. And I think it's important to say that when the crisis happened, this is the picture from Madagascar. Those were the guys that started to take photos and videos of what was going on, because as soon as the coup happened, censorship of mainstream media was there. But they never thought that blogs would matter to anything in Madagascar, given that the internet penetration is about 0.15%, I think. But now they know that those guys exist, and they know because they've been blocked from the UN for the past 2 years. And also that they cannot get any more international aid from the European Commission, from the US, and all that, because, well, they've been bad people, basically. Our latest project is my personal favorite. It's the Technology for Transparency Network. And I'm sure, as you've been aware, there's been a lot of chatter about citizen media and its actual impact. Most famously, Malcolm Gladwell recently wrote in the New Yorker that the revolution will not be tweeted. And there was quite a bit of chatter about that essay, I believe. And we believe that it was a relevant point. We need to actually do the proper research and analysis about what exactly is the impact of digital media. So we decided to start this project where we have 47 right now case studies, where we ask the people that have online or mobile technology-driven project and ask them why they started, what are their milestones, and what lesson learned, and whether they've reached their actual objectives. We focused first on projects that were geared towards transparency and accountability, but we're moving towards other tech-based projects as well. And so there's 47 now. We have a new batch. I think we will publish the report within 2 weeks, the next new one, another 45 case studies that we've been conducting. All right, so yes, that is one of them in China. So basically, when it comes to social changes and technology, I think our take-home message is quite simple, that in order to have meaningful impact in the places that we care for, we need first and foremost to listen, and listen carefully and listen continuously, because if we're there before things happen, then we have a better understanding of what is going on. And we also need to listen effectively, and that is the purpose of that last project. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce Priscilla, and then because I know many of you have class at 8 o'clock, then we'll just go straight towards your questions. So here's Priscilla. 10 minutes, right? Yeah. 10 or 15. That one.
Yeah, it usually lets me see my notes by myself, but that's okay. Hi, everyone. Hello. You guys still there? It's good to be here. Thank you, everyone, for organizing this event and for coming. Who here is familiar with Witness? Just so, okay. I'll go faster then. So Witness was created 18 years ago by Peter Gabriel, the Lawyers Committee for Human Rights, which is now Human Rights First. The main idea was, what if everyone who was suffering a human rights violation or human rights abuse had a camera at their disposal so that they could record their stories and tell the world their stories. So that was the first idea, help Witness give cameras to the world. This was before flip cameras, way before the internet. It was a pioneering idea at its time. Since then, we've worked in 75 countries. We've partnered with more than 250 organizations. We've trained thousands of human rights defenders, and we have a media archive in Brooklyn at our offices that has about 4,000 hours of human rights video, most of it, if not all, recorded by our partners in the last 18 years. Witness believes that video has the power of putting human into human rights. We don't make any videos ourselves. What we do is we partner with affected communities and local grassroots groups. And we have a media archive in Brooklyn at our offices that has about 4,000 hours of human rights video, most of it, if not all, recorded by our partners in the last 18 years. Witness believes that video has the power of putting human into human rights. We don't make any videos ourselves. What we do is we partner with affected communities and local grassroots groups that have an existing human rights advocacy goal, and we train them to make their own videos, and then we become partners on an advocacy campaign. So it's a little bit different than community media, but it's still bringing new voices into the dialogue about human rights issues. So video advocacy, the way that we define this, it's not video done for a promotional purpose or video to explain what an organization does or video for fundraising, but we define it as using video as a tool to promote concrete changes in policies, behaviors, practices, and laws. So that's how we measure our success. So we always say advocacy is the purpose, video is the medium, change is the goal. We don't make video about an issue, we make video for a very specific purpose, be it to pass a law, be it to change a policy, be it to improve a practice around a given human rights issue. So the pillars of video advocacy. First, you define your goal. So what is your specific human rights goal that you're trying to achieve? And then you look at, okay, if my goal is to pass this law or to stop this practice or to improve this policy, who can do that, right? And that person or that group of people become my targeted audiences. We like to talk a lot about smart narrowcasting as opposed to broadcasting. So for a specific video in a given advocacy campaign, it could be more strategic that your video is seen by one person instead of 1 million. If that one person is the judge that's ruling on your issue, if those 7 people are the commissioners on a human rights committee ruling about something you care about. So it's a very inverse model of smart narrowcasting. Who needs to see this video so that something can change, and how do we make sure that person or those group of people see this video? So once we have the goal and the audience, we talk about story and message. So who's the best placed person to talk about this message? Often, in our experience, it is the person who is at the front line of the human rights violation. So more often than not, it's not going to be an expert. It's going to be the person who is there in the community living it day to day, which is why we don't do the filming. One more reason why we don't do the filming. Once we have the story and the message, so what kind of message will our audience hear? What do they need to hear? Who does it need to come from? Once we have that defined, we talk about distribution. So we usually pick a goal somewhere in the horizon and we work backwards. So if our goal is to get a video screened at the Human Rights Council session a year from now, what are the steps we need to take to get there, and how can we do our plan so that we get our video there at our strategic venue? Impact, hopefully at the end of these steps we'll have impact related to the advocacy goal, and I'm going to get more specific here in a bit. And then archive. It's so important to archive your videos. We have, as I said, an extensive archive with 4,000 hours, and we've seen 10, 15 years later some of that footage be used in judicial cases around massacres and other human rights atrocities. And had that video not been preserved, had that human rights memory not been preserved, that evidence also would have been lost in these cases 10, 15 years down the road. The archive is searchable online, by the way, if anyone is really interested in that. And then evaluation. So the 3 key things that we have to keep in mind throughout all of these steps: safety, security, and consent. Where to begin? Safety and security. Who are you putting at risk by pointing your camera? What are the risks that need to be considered? We normally work with what we call a worst case scenario, in which we train our partners to train their interviewees and to talk through what the worst case scenario is of that interview being seen, of that image being used, and to make sure that there's fully informed consent from the person being interviewed. If the risk outweighs, if the person decides that that risk is too large, then we talk about ways of mitigating identity, concealing identity, mitigating risks. But the important thing is to really think that through to make sure that we're not creating new risks or creating new human rights violations by pointing our camera and distributing our videos. So safety, security, and consent. In practice, I'm usually show a lot of video, but in respect to the 10, 15 minutes, which I know I'll go over anyway, I'm going to not show video. I'm going to quickly walk you through 2 very short case studies, and you can see this video all online. So this case study comes from the eastern part of the DRC in Africa. The human rights issue is child soldiers. This is a partnership that we did with a local grassroots organization called Agedica. Agedica was based in Uvira, and it was an NGO specialized in demobilizing and rehabilitating children that had been either voluntarily or forcefully enlisted into the armed conflict in the DRC. So with this footage that this group had shot, we made 2 different films with the same footage, okay? So one film is this one on the front lines, and the other film, Duty to Protect. And I'm gonna explain why 2 different films. So going back to the 5 different steps in each film. In the first film, we had one goal, which was to sensitize local communities about what was actually happening to these children once they were enlisted into the militias. A lot of the enlistment that was happening was voluntary, and there was a misconception that these children were being taken care of once they enlisted, that they were receiving shelter and food and education and things that many of these families weren't able to provide themselves. So the first goal, first movie, the goal, the audience, totally offline. It's mostly villagers in the eastern DRC, families of children that either are or have been or could be potentially involved in these, in the fighting. So the story, you can see Bayombe there, who is a demobilized child soldier, who gives a harrowing testimony about what it was like to be a child soldier. So this gets into who is the right messenger for your audience, right? Nothing better than a former child soldier. If I had been in that video saying it's awful to be a child soldier, I would question my own credibility. So this was a child soldier speaking about what it was really like. The strategic distribution, as I said, was primarily offline. It was organized with a white sheet and a small projector in several different towns and villages in the eastern DRC. And the film was used as a mechanism to start debate and discussion. So after the film was screened, communities would come up and ask questions and talk about their own experiences. And the goal here was to reduce the amount of voluntary enlistment, which our partner did attest to when they did the evaluation later. So that's the advocacy impact in this. With the same footage, we made Duty to Protect. The goal in Duty to Protect was completely different. It was to make sure that the people who had legal mandates and were legally accountable to prosecute this were doing so. In this case, the best audience that our partners assessed along with us was the ICC, the International Criminal Court, which was newly formed at the time. So this footage was submitted to them as evidence of this atrocity and this human rights violation, and also with a very clear message of, you have the mandate to prosecute this, here's the evidence, do something about it. So the goal there was completely different, the audience there was completely different. It involved US policymakers as well in a push to get the US to join the ICC. Who knows when that'll happen, if that'll happen. The story was, again, a mix of the child soldiers speaking about this and different experts who we thought would resonate with that audience. And then the strategic distribution was targeted screenings to the ICC prosecutors and other policymakers in DC and related bodies. The impact there was, and of course, we always say video is not a magic wand. It doesn't replace any other tools. It's one more tool. It can be used for good or bad. It's a complement to existing strategies. So it doesn't substitute the march, the petition, the lobbying, the letter writing. All of that is very necessary, and it's not always the best tool. But sometimes it could have that tipping point effect if used strategically and if used effectively. So video was a little piece of this campaign, and then in 2009, the International Criminal Court announced its first trial ever against Thomas Lubanga, which was a Congolese warlord, and he was charged with conscripting children in his militia. So we see this as part of what led to that. And then came the internet. So 5 years ago, 6 years ago, there was no YouTube. Imagine that. There was no Facebook. The world was very different, at least in our corner. And Witness started off to create this new platform, which was called The Hub, which was an envisioned kind of like a YouTube, but only for human rights media, nonprofit owned, nonprofit created, by human rights defenders, for human rights defenders. It was supposed to be a Facebook that did the social networking. It was supposed to be a meetup that translated online action to offline action. It was supposed to be a Wikipedia where communities would self-moderate content and authenticate human rights content. And it was supposed to be a dedicated space for human rights media. That space still exists, but the project has been transitioned off. And I'm happy to, if anyone is interested in why, I'm happy to talk more about that at another point. But I want to focus more on the lessons learned and the challenges that are still on the table. New opportunities that the internet brings for human rights documentation and for citizen-generated media around human rights documentation. It's important to remember that historically, human rights monitoring has been the task of very few highly trained professionals because it can endanger lives. It's a very risky kind of thing to do. It requires a level of accuracy and legitimacy, and it's based on levels of trust. With the internet, anyone now can document this human rights violation and put it online, right? So that's definitely a new opportunity. I have there 2 images. One is of Video the Vote, which is an awesome project here in the US, which basically allows people to election monitor with their cell phones, upload those videos or SMSs to one central database, kind of like with Shahidi, and then monitor election fraud or any other kind of irregularities that are happening on election day. The one just below, which you can see on 10 Tactics, amazing film called 10 Tactics for Turning Information into Action. It's by Tactical Technology Collective. So this is a Google map of the Tunisian presidential palace. Tunisia was ignoring the activists' campaign to spotlight torture that was state-sanctioned. So the campaigners had a very interesting idea, which was to go to Google Maps, and all these little points that you see around the presidential palace, they're not snapshots of the palace or interesting facts about the historical landmark. They're videos of people that have been tortured and that the state is ignoring. So here's a very creative use of video mapping technologies. Someone goes and Googles Tunisian presidential palace, and what they see are these first-hand testimonies of torture. Love it. You can see it. I highly recommend Tactical Technologies film. You can see it online for free and download it. So new opportunities. You can reach new audiences. You can reclaim narratives. So think about the work that Globalvoices is doing and Cotton Tree is doing around taking populations that have been historically excluded from the conversation and giving them the tools they need to reclaim their own narratives. Report, contest, provide evidence, watch back, surveillance, and I'll talk more about this in the next slide because I love that word. Build collective intelligence. So now we have groups reappropriating these spaces to, there's a group in Egypt that is taking all of their traditional folklore and rewriting it with a feminist twist, and that's going up online, so it's a counter-narrative that's very interesting. when you think about dominating narratives. Pressure decision makers, include and amplify new voices, Culture Jam Web 2.0, Yes Men, many others along that line that are Chevron Toxico people, you know, that are using these medias to get alternative messages out there. Surveillance versus surveillance, very quickly. So surveillance, as we know, we're being watched. The camera's up there, the government's watching us. Surveillance comes from some Canadian scholars who said, you know what, with these new tools, now it's inverse. So we can watch back. We all have our cell phones, they all have cameras. So if you have one camera watching me, we have 35 watching you back. So there. I love that concept. You can see this in different ways. This is a stoning of a young girl in northern Iraq. You can see it's being shot by a cell phone. It's being shot by the perpetrator, but this is often the case. Perpetrators shoot themselves doing awful things. We'll never understand that. And then it backfires. So this was an interesting case of that. I'm not going to talk more about it, but you can Google it. In Cambodia, a group that we're working with called Likido, we did a training there, left a bunch of flip cameras, and they documented the moment when police opened fire on a bunch of unarmed farmers in a land dispute in the Siem Reap province. So that's, again, like, it's a watching back that wasn't possible before the advent of these new tools. Ushahidi, it's been talked about, crisis mapping tool developed by Kenyan software developers and being deployed recently in Haiti, Chile. It's an open platform that anyone can use and adapt. And Oscar Grant case, I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but it was in Oakland, California. A young man was shot and killed by a police officer as he lay face down and restrained and handcuffed on the ground. Who knows how this police report would have been written had there not been 25 eyewitness cameras, mobile phones filming it and then uploading it onto the internet afterwards. So this is just one example of the opportunities that it brings. To finish, with new opportunities come new risks and new challenges. So first challenge, what's real? And I love Globalvoices because every time I'm not sure, I go and see what is Globalvoices saying. And that'll help me figure out if it's real or not. There's so much information out there. How can we tell what's authentic, what's not, what's real, what's not? Context, how do we understand it? So languages, certain specific circumstances that we may not be familiar with. It's a huge challenge also for filtering this information. 24 hours a minute, does anyone know what I mean by that? That is the quantity of footage that is uploaded to YouTube per minute. So 1 day of footage is uploaded to YouTube per minute. So imagine you're an activist and you're thinking, I'm going to put my video on YouTube and everyone's going to see it. It's a very small drop in a very vast ocean, which is why we come back to the point about strategic targeting of your audiences. Who needs to see this and how can you make sure they see it? The whole slacktivism versus activism debate, which I love. Do you encourage activism, and is it real activism when people click on petitions online, or is it just an excuse for activism that make people think they're active? But in fact, they're only slackers. Excuse me. I need to finish. Safety and security, which I've talked about. Ethics, consent, re-victimization. When forwarding a video, are you re-victimizing the person in that video? What is the role you're playing if it's not inserted with a call to action? So how to think about the ethics and the consent and the re-victimization. How to translate offline action to online and back and forth. How to make advocacy linkages from the regional to the local to the international that are actually meaningful, that are not just fundraising based or just solidarity based, which is super important, but that are also advocacy based. And last but not least, how to witness in real time. So we're starting to live stream. What happens when someone live streams a massacre? What is our ethical responsibility? What is our human responsibility to that. How do we deal with that? Yeah? So to finish, I invite you to think about those challenges with me and look at this photo, which is a photo of a forced eviction in Cambodia, filmed by one of our partners there. We're now working globally on this theme of forced evictions in the name of development. And if we just look at this one photo, who's at risk from this image being circulated? So you have the local people that are resisting the eviction, you have the person who's behind the camera, you have the person driving the tractor. Although the face is covered, there are a series of risks involved in the producing and the circulating of this image that we need to discuss and be aware of. Monks uprising in Burma, 2007, it's reported, and no one knows for sure, that over 2,000 people were arrested after these protests simply for appearing in a video. So when we were circulating these videos, the Burmese government was also watching these videos, pressing pause, and identifying protesters to persecute them afterwards. And the same thing happened in Iran in the recent post-election protests. The Iranian government set up a special unit called Gerdab, whose sole mission was to monitor citizen-generated media online to track and identify protesters. So I leave you with that. I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic, but I think it's important that we as media makers and media thinkers think very carefully about the risks involved with all these new tools. Thank you.
Okay, so just before everybody leaves to go to class, we have like 5 or 10 minutes before 8 o'clock, I wanted to open the floor to questions. And these are questions that will be captured in the video that we post. So if you do have a question, you have to talk into the microphone. Would anybody like to pose a question to the panel? Did you?
I always am concerned about the fact that there's so little money available to activists. There's so much money available to people who have great interests. And I always, when blogs first started, I remember I went to a political blogging group, top people who had been in newspapers, things of that nature. And I was concerned about the fact that once blogging became important enough, that very rich interests would take it over, and that they would become the people who controlled what was mostly seen by people. I'm wondering what you see, whether you see that as a problem, and if so, how you consider being able to ever counteract that.
I think you should take it.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Great question. I think what we have to do first as bloggers is first to identify whether we are actually being paid, right, when we do, because there is such a thing as a paid blogging. And Globalvoices as an organization is being supported by many funders, and all of them you can see on our front page. So as much as possible, we want it to be transparent. Whenever you have financial support, you need to tell it up front, basically. Whether we can prevent big money, like you said, to interfere with the conversation that's happening, it's a conversation that is ongoing, at least among us as bloggers. We had recently a conference for Middle East where I think the US government, for example, has a very strong net freedom policy right now where they try to give grants to bloggers, citizen media to talk about what's going on in their countries. And the conversation goes as such, like when the US government provides the grant, then we lose also a little bit of our neutrality. So we first wanted to put a lot of events that we witness online, but the fact that you help us sometimes doesn't really help us. So, but like you said, everybody needs some funding, otherwise those videos don't get uploaded. So the tension is there, whether we have the right answer, because, well, I don't think anyone is really trying to say that the U.S. government might have some hidden agenda. Whether they do or not, it's really, if the funding is not there in the first place, then the video doesn't show up, so it becomes a moot point. But I think there's two different camps. At least within Global Voice itself, a lot of people are saying, okay, if there's grant, there is money that comes from government or this corporation, then we'd rather not take it. But it's, and a lot of people are also thinking that, well, first we need to get the video online and then we see how it goes. I'm not sure I answered your question, but the conversation is still ongoing, basically.
I was interested in the way that a lot of, well, especially Digital Democracy and Witness and Global Voices are able to partner with local organizations, and how they find those organizations or people specifically for Witness. Because that's not my phone. I work for an organization called Deep Dish TV, and we're in the process of developing this online collaborative map that maps community media around the world. And I have some flyers for it here if anybody's interested. But what I'm really interested in is how we're able to learn, various community media organizations are able to learn from each other and their own experiences, and then how to collaborate more effectively. And I think of an organization like Cotton Tree News, how you're able to meet perhaps like another organization that is right next door that you don't know about, or and how like that network is built, because I feel like the way that a movement like this for community media is really becomes more powerful is by collaborating and mobilizing as a movement globally. And so I was interested in a couple of the maps that I think I saw on several of your PowerPoints, and what like how you are using those maps and how you're using mapping to connect with various organizations and to connect the organizations themselves, as opposed to just, for your own purposes, also connecting them so that they can collaborate.
I guess I can start a little bit about the partnering with organizations and communities. It's extremely important not to reinvent the wheel and not to be doing work that other people are doing. It's also extremely important to be working with community organizations because they know the community, they know the environment, they know the risks, they know the security issues, especially when you're working in sensitive areas. We're working with a lot of, Burmese groups in Thailand and India and Bangladesh. And the thing that we do is there's no better connections you can make than if you go there. We always travel to those locations. A lot of times we've had connections going into it, but really it came from traveling there. You meet organizations that are doing great work, and you develop relationships with them, and you develop trust, which is key, and you build your programming from there. We build our programming from the needs of organizations. So, and sort of bringing in the mapping, we have a program called Handheld Human Rights, which I mentioned, which incorporates mapping, and it's for all of these community-based organizations working in Thailand along the border of these of Burmese refugees who've all resettled there, and a ton of them are part of organizations working on a number of issues. So we, we created that programming to allow them to report human rights abuses that they were hearing about through their networks. They have vast networks, and there's no reason why we should try to create our own when we can partner with them and help them do exactly what they want to do. So the same, and we used Ushahidi, which I mentioned and Priscilla mentioned, to that platform to make that program instead of creating our own. We used that, that programming to allow that to happen. We used the same one in Haiti, but we formed it around gender-based violence, and there is a number of organizations working in Haiti that are grassroots women's organizations working to spread the word about gender-based violence and reporting it. So, and we met them by going to, we went to Haiti in April, and, they were working with the UN, and we went down there and met with them, and that's how we developed those relationships.
Yeah, for Cutting Through News, several factors influenced our decision to partner with organizations. In the first place, Sierra Leone is pretty much a centralized country. Everything happens in the capital. News is about what happens in the capital, Freetown, and not up country. That's one. And so the first thing was to partner with the university, which has a radio station and a department of mass communications. Now, by so doing, it's like a symbiotic relationship. We create employment for students in the departments who form the core of the staff. So the students also have the opportunity for hands-on practical experience in addition to the theoretical approaches they are being taught in the class. So they are taught in the departments, and then they have the CTN project that provides the forum for practical experience. So that was the one strategic partnership. And then we decided to partner with the United Nations Radio because towards the end of the conflict in Sierra Leone, the United Nations decided to establish its own radio station, given the fact that the government's radio was very much not credible in the eyes of the public. So, but they had repeater transmitters in strategic places around the country. So they cover pretty much about 60 to 70% of the country. So by partnering with United Nations Radio, we're able to enhance our reach. But that was also not sufficient. Now, we didn't want to report just events happening in Freetown. We want to cover the whole country because it was a nationwide project. So we identified community radio stations. And that's it was a relationship, or it's a relationship that is of mutual benefit. As I said, the community radio stations are bedeviled with so many problems ranging from funding to poor infrastructure and the lack of capacity, both technical and manpower. And you'll agree with me that news reporting is a very expensive enterprise. And they don't have that capacity to report news. So what they do, they help us in order to get the audience and to cover the country. And as that's our own benefit. On their part, they also benefit in terms of content. Instead of playing music for the whole rest of the day, they have quality program, news, and events through their radio stations. And what we do is to also recruit members or staff, a key staff of that radio station, to be our district correspondent for that particular area. So at the end of the day, we cover news and programs that are actually national in outlook. So we also help them in terms of technical expertise, fixing the machines or the transmitter. So it's in spite of the fact that we have the funding, we have the money, there is no way we can be successful without partners. And we pretty much work with both local and national partners. In addition to that also, community radio stations have an association, an umbrella association called the Independent Radio Network. They are funded through an organization called Search for Common Ground. Search for Common Ground, I think it was somebody from Canada went and launched that project, and then they have the Talking Drum Studio. So pretty much we are working with the Independent Radio Network, we are working with Search for Common Ground. Those are also umbrella organizations that are sustaining and building the capacity of community radio stations. We also have a Dutch-sponsored organization called Infomotrack, which was a mobile community training group. Its business was to actually move into communities, help set up community radio stations, train the capacity, but that's that. In terms of content, they did not actually provide anything. But the problem was, once you have those community radio stations, you need to fill them with content. And because of this sense of community ownership has not gone down, either because of bad administration or because the managers have not created the awareness that community radio stations is for the community and must be served by the community, and that people in the community must contribute to its sustenance. So what happens most often than not is that they find themselves in situations where there are no programs, they can't do news, they can't run programs, they don't even have the quality recorder to go out and do programs. So whilst they provide the avenue for us to reach our targeted audience, we provide them content. So that's how there is this symbiotic relationship between we and our partners.
Just super quickly on how we find partners. It's either through an application process or people just coming to us, finding us through our network. So we've been around for 18 years, so there are established former partner networks and groups that know us from that work. We have a relatively limited capacity. We're 30 people in Brooklyn and an army of amazing, fantastic interns, one of which is whom here tonight, Neil Hicks. You are awesome. So we have relatively limited capacity, but that's normally the way the partnerships come. We just rearranged our programmatic work a bit, and for the first time, we picked themes that we're going to focus on. And for this process, we are proactively reaching out.
Okay, so actually we have time for one more question, and I'm going to take the question over here.
Thanks so much for your presentations. I actually wanted to pose a similar question that was on the explanation of the program for today, but more focused on social movement rather than civil society. And particularly, I'm interested in understanding, since two of the panelists are working in Africa. So what do you see as the potential of, the role of those new media or even old media in reorganizing or kind of contributing to social movement in Madagascar, Sierra Leone, or at large in Africa, although we can't talk about the continent as this general thing because there are a lot of differences. We saw the situation in Tunisia, etc. But in terms of potential of these kind of practices and media activism, in particularly in that context. And the reason why I'm asking this, and I'm actually extending this comment to the audience in general, is because I've been helping in the media. I mean, first of all, because there's going to be a World Social Forum in Dakar next year, and I'm sure maybe all of you know about it. And I'm helping in the media to fundraise for their media convergence workshop. So I wanted to also ask you at large, also people in the audience, if they have suggestions, unfortunately only for fundraising, because that's what we can do from here, because I heard about a lot about foundations who are helping this community radio project, etc. So basically they're organizing a 2 weeks training, and I also wanted to witness some help around that. And there are going to be 100 delegates from more than 10 African countries who's going to go there, be trained, and then they're going to report on the World Social Forum back to their home country. So any suggestion, idea, I'm going to be here if you'd like to talk to me. But also like more in general as a question in terms of relationship between social movement and media in the context of Africa, in many different African contexts.
Social movement, by their very definition, are seen by the establishment as radicals or as rebels. And coming from a country where before 2000, the media was very much totalitarian, it's pretty much difficult for social movement to have a voice in government-controlled media. So what happens is that social movements go more in tandem with alternative media. Because alternative media, it's also radical in our view. It's seen not only as a community media in its own right, it's also seen as part of civil society, and it's also, it gives voice to social movements. So in a country where there is no free marketplace for the expression of views and ideas, it's medium like Cutting Tree News, which functions pretty much as an alternative media that can give voices for social movements to thrive and to give their platform and to articulate their views. Otherwise, I don't see the possibility of a government-controlled media, even if it is given the nomenclature of a public media. I don't see a possibility of how the management of a public media can give voice to social movements. So for social movements to actually to be formed and to thrive and to articulate their views, I think there should be a fertile ground for either community or alternative media to exist. And that's exactly what we are trying to provide, an alternative to either commercial, corporate, or government-controlled radio.
Very quickly, I would take the example of what we try to do with respect to protecting the rainforest in Madagascar. So what happened is there were a few citizen reporters over there that were witnessing illegal logging, trafficking of the rosewood there. Basically, people with a lot of money cutting down the forest and jeopardizing the living space of indigenous population there. What we had to do was from the footage that they had there. So we're talking about a very small population here, but for that to have a meaningful impact in preventing the forest from being more pillaged, we had to partner with WWF and International Conservation, saying, okay, we have those footage right now. It's part of a larger type of network from people who are sending the rosewood and cutting the trees outside towards China. And we cannot do this alone, basically. And from there, we had their help, and eventually we were the result of this small action from the bloggers about documenting this deforestation was that when it was took up by WWF and other international agency, we were able to get the US Parliament to actually say it was a criminal activity, get stores that were using precious wood in the US to be banned from actually using the wood. So I guess it's not really a social movement per se, but from a small action, you can get the target that you want, given that you actually know exactly where you want to go with it, I think.
Okay. Did you want to say something else?
No. I wanted to just add, can I ask one question? I think this gets to the question about social movements kind of gets to the heart of Gladwell's criticism, right?
Right.
Which is the way that how the internet organizes us. Right. I mean, can you, I think maybe if you,
Right.
Can you perhaps, especially since you are from Globalvoices, who does a lot of this, especially.
Yes, and I think
the others can also comment if they want. I just thought maybe
right?
if you wanted to say something about Gladwell's criticism, which is that I also don't agree with him, but I do think we have to engage with that.
Right.
You know, there's all this internet, and
Right.
the internet is changing alternative media and community media, but does it lead to like lasting political action and organization?
So first off, I think if you don't mind, I'll say that for us, this whole social media, digital tools, it's really it's a tool. It enables to amplify whatever is already strongly there. As a community, Globalvoices, it's 400 people from all over the place. It doesn't exist, and it wouldn't have the impact that it has right now if not every year we all gather together, and whatever the cost of that is, we just gather. We were in Budapest, we were in New Delhi, in Santiago, I'm sorry. We were in Santiago not too long ago, and we have this policy where it's called from VRV, so from virtual to real life to virtual again. We have to have that real life connection. And it is very important because if I go back to how we make partnership, and in our case, we also have a Ushahidi deployment in Madagascar for the political crisis, but that only happened because when I met in real life with the founder of Ushahidi, the Kenyan founders, then we connected, and then we were able to make that map. Once we made the map, we created a community in Thomason, which is a remote place in Madagascar, where they say, okay, we have troubles here. That, in turn, led to a very big social group that was based there, but that had no online presence at all, to seek out for those guys and say, oh, you guys are here? So we have a connection that was from Kenya to Madagascar to actually becoming a connection from two communities that were close to each other, but didn't know that those two places. And then they came together. Those guys brought their online know-how, and the other guys brought what they had there, a very strong community that was based in that village. And now those two communities in that remote place in Madagascar is making some serious progress. So that's, I think, the best way I can illustrate how digital tools enhance whatever is there. If it's not there, I don't think you cannot do anything anyway.
I'll just super quickly agree with that. I'm on the optimists' end of that debate. I think more video has been created than ever. More video is being watched online than ever. Do more videos online equal more change? I'm not sure yet. But are there specific examples where I can trace the trajectory of a video and say, the video was created, it was uploaded here, then these 3 Facebook communities came up to support it, then a news article came up, and then the government had to issue, like there are very clear examples where that can happen. Again, it comes down to how strategically, how effectively what's online is being used, and I completely agree with Lova. It's not going to create something that doesn't already exist, but it can absolutely enhance what does already exist.
Yeah, I'll also say something quickly just because, briefly about traditional media. Because I work in television as well, and it's network, I mean, it's on TV, television, traditional. I'll say this, in that there's been a lot of talk as video online became extremely popular, is this going to be a problem for television, especially when it's free and all of these things. And I agree that it, in that case, also enhances it. It's being used to build almost a campaign around television shows. I mean, it's with all different medias. They did it with Lost and Mad Men, and it's just giving people more. And I think there's always going to be ways online that people can use it in the way you don't want them to use it, and that's the risk that we take. But you can also really make the media experience that much better.
When TV was created, they said, oh, no one's going to listen to the radio anymore. Yeah. And then when, we always see this cycle, and people still listen to the radio.
I think it's really too early to really assess whether it worked or it didn't. We need more time, more.
No, I agree with you. I was just wondering what you all thought of this.
I think there's a lot of undue credit being given. Like, I don't think the Iranian protests happened because of Twitter, right? But Twitter did play a role, so I think his criticism is valid when it comes to that, like the overstatement of the power of these tools. Because again, these tools, they're just tools. They could be used for good and bad. You have an activist community that has a YouTube channel, and Al-Qaeda has a YouTube channel. It's a neutral medium. It can be used either way.
Okay. Well, on that note, I'm going to have to formally end the panel. Thank you, everybody, for staying through this. And thank you so much for your time and your energy. And so if you have remaining questions, feel free to stick around and talk to the panelists.